All right, so now we're going to talk about the North American, the U.S. Native Americans. Now, while we can't go over all of them because there are literally hundreds or descendants of hundreds still living today, but we will cover a couple of cultures. So we have the Woodland culture, ancient woodland cultures. And so those Native Americans really focused on staying near the woods. They were very connected to the earth in that sense, but they did exploit the earth a little bit. They had a hard time finding balance when it came to hunting and agriculture. But there were many great things about them. They used many of the practices, them and the Mississippian culture used many of the practices modern farmers use today, such as burning. So I do this in my garden every year. After the garden's done, my summer garden's done, we'll burn the garden. And because when you burn it, it fertilizes the ground. You burn all of the stuff, you let it grow up a little bit, get the weeds, you burn that, and it creates a natural fertilizer for the land. So that helps keep the land fertile. And they also did crop rotations, which is something modern farmers do now as well. The Indians, the Native Americans, started noticing that about after 8 years, their crops weren't as good. They weren't producing as much. So they started rotating crops. So that was something that was very intelligent and something, again, you only know if you're really paying attention to the earth, to what's going on. So when I say that they weren't always super in balance, no, they weren't. A lot of times they weren't with the amount of hunting. If they were after the agricultural development that the Native Americans started, which is so important to our lives today. After that, when that became so widespread, that also diminished some of their trade. You know, if they were really good at growing corn, but now everybody's good at growing corn, there's not as much of a supply and demand. So they had to go wean a little bit away from just agriculture. And sometimes, with anything, the pendulum would swing a little too far over to hunting or a little too far over to agriculture. So there had to be better balance. They were working on it. They were amazing at what they did. But as humans, it's always trial and error. And that's what they were doing as well. Unfortunately, the U.S. Native Americans in general, their populations and their cultures were were smaller in term as far as longevity, but the Native American culture was as diverse as it is as modern day North America, modern day U.S. We have a lot of different people with different cultures, different beliefs, different thoughts on how land should be used, many things. Well, the Native Americans in the United States were very much like that. Some were very connected to the earth and, very religiously connected as well. And others were more warlike. So while we don't want to categorize any individual as a warlike person, we do see some of the same diversity that we have in our modern day in the Native Americans as well, which I think is super awesome that we can really make that connection between the ancient peoples where they really were limited on the tools they had, so many things, but down to the core, you still get the connection that these were people and they were developing and they were quite intelligent. And when we compare their traits, their human traits, not just their way of life, but their human traits and characteristics to the people in the current United States. I love seeing that we're connected throughout time. We are strongly connected with our different groups, religious beliefs, beliefs on how to use land. It's very amazing. And one of the other things that the Native Americans did have, some cultures had a class system, which means that the more money or the more prominence you have, that's where you're at. And we've talked about this before, but the poorer you are, that's where you're going to be. And then some Native Americans even had a slave class. So while we often think of slaves as in people shipped over here and sold, the Native Americans had a slave system as well, just like the rest of the world did. So that is something to keep in mind when we discuss slavery, is where did this thought that it's okay to own another person come from? Where did it originate from? And why was it still popular for thousands of years? So we'll discuss that more later, but it's something just to put in your mental bank for later. Now, not all Native Americans had a class system. Some Native American tribes and cultures had an equality system. Everyone was equal. Everyone was on the same playing field. So, and some Native American cultures really discouraged individual wealth or individual prominence, trying to be seen as an individual versus part of the community. While other Native American tribes really promoted that pride, sense of valor, achievement. And I find this also very interesting because when we think of the United States and our modern day corporate world or our modern day system, if you think about the people who are supposed to be competitive and seeking individuality as part of a team, think sports, think CEOs, the business life, then also think about, are teachers supposed to be super competitive? Are they supposed to be like, oh, my kiddos did best? Unfortunately, I am one of those teachers, but that's not what we're focusing on right now. It's not going to be a teacher personal development moment right now. But think about the different jobs. Working at McDonald's versus working at Red Lobster versus dining at Red Lobster. So those are different categories of things that we take a look at and see our ancient peoples, where we come from and our culture really derives from, is very similar. They have a lot of unique characteristics that we share. Now, the Mississippian community or culture, they were very much in the waterways, and that was pretty much from the Mississippi River. They stayed close to water tributaries, and they went over to the coast, the East Coast, and of course down into Florida as well. But with the Mississippian cultures, they were very focused on water, fishing, hunting, and agriculture as well. So these Native Americans consist of some of, for me, the most common that I know of. But let me read a list. The Cherokees, the Catawbas, the Creeks, the Chickasaws, and the Choctaws. So to me, those are the ones, because I grew up in the South, those are the ones I know most about. And I actually have family ties, like my mother's side of the family are descendants of the Cherokee Indians. So there is a little bit of personal reflection there as well. But We won't go into the individual tribes because that's like a whole year's worth of classes if we tried to cover all of the tribes that we have or have had in the past in the United States.